Well, hello and welcome back. We are in the middle of a chapter, and the chapter is called A Bushel of Neckties. And some of you wanted to know what a bushel is? It's just like a big basket. So imagine about how big a barrel is, and that's probably how big the bushel is. So if that's full of neckties, and neckties, by the way, are just fancy bow ties. So if you've ever seen men that have a tie right here and then it comes out with two triangles like that, you tie it, that's a bow tie. And they just call them neckties. So let's see how we're going to be able to sell those in the middle of the gold fields. All right. The next morning, Praiseworthy and Jack helped Pitchpine Billy dig a coyote hole. So I don't know if we've talked much about coyote holes, but coyote holes was one way to look for gold, and you would just dig a hole in the ground, and it would be a really narrow, steep, deep hole, and you would be looking for gold that was caught amongst the rocks as you were digging down. So the problem with a coyote hole is that if you fell into one, then you may have a really hard time getting out. And miners would dig these and not really know what they were doing, so sometimes they would collapse. And anyway, it was not a super popular method of mining, but some people did do it. "Once we hit bedrock, there's no telling the riches down there," the miner declared. "The Spangles keep working and sifting through the ground, earthquakes and all. It may take 'em 10,001 years to reach bedrock, but that stops 'em." By late afternoon, the big hole was deeper than Praiseworthy's head. They rigged up a rope and lifted out dirt by the bucketful. There were men all along the diggings, coyoteing for gold, and some of the shafts were as deep as wells. So it sort of reminds me of that episode where the mountain meets the moon when the green tiger fell into the well. Jack took his turns at the bottom of the hole, filling buckets that were emptied into the long tom. The long tom was a wooden sluice box set in the stream. Rushing water rushed the dirt along a trough, and the bits of gold were trapped in iron rifles along the bottom. Praiseworthy kept silent about the neckties. Even by the end of the next day, there was no rush to buy them, as he had predicted. But he remained unconcerned. Jack wondered if Praiseworthy had merely been trying to spare his feelings after the ridiculous purchase he'd made. He was glad to forget it, but said no more. The following morning, a delegation of 3 men appeared on Pitchpine Billy's claim. Jack recognized Mr. Jonas T. Fletcher at once. The undertaker had brought 2 Hangtown merchants with him. They came looking for Praiseworthy, who was at the bottom of the coyote hole. Jack and Pitchpine Billy hauled him out on a rope, and Praiseworthy looked as if he had been dipped in dust. It clung to his eyelashes as he blinked. "If bedrock's any deeper," he said to Pitchpine Billy, "we'll be digging gold to China." "Bullwhip," said the undertaker. "You've got to uphold the fair name of Hangtown." "What's that?" "We've been delivered a challenge." Praiseworthy began beating the dirt out of his slouch hat. "Is that so?" "Yep. A feller over at Grizzly Flats has heard about you. He says he can whip you." Jack looked up. Praiseworthy hardly blinked an eye. He merely continued knocking the dust out of his hair. "Is that so?" "Yep. Of course, he don't know beef from a bull's foot to make a statement like that. He ain't exactly bright. Although I understand he can write his own name if you give him time enough. But he is a regular big fella. The Mountain Ox, they call him. Well, how about it?" "It doesn't sound like a fair match," said Praiseworthy. The undertaker nodded. "He does have you on height and weight and reach and general meanness, I suppose." "That's not what I meant," said Praiseworthy. "It wouldn't be fair to him." The 3 gentlemen from Hangtown responded with a blank look. "How's that?" Even Jack was startled by Praiseworthy's declaration. The Mountain Ox seemed enormous. Praiseworthy wouldn't have a chance. Had he begun to believe his own reputation? From what you tell me, gentlemen, the man can barely read and write. He'll be at a decided disadvantage. Pitchpine Billy pulled his hat down over his ears. Bullwhip, will you tell me what readin' and writin' has got to do with bare-knuckle fightin'? I suppose that remains to be seen. Then you'll fight him? The undertaker grinned. Not by choice, sir, but if the fair name of Hangtown is at stake, I suppose I must. The delegation smiled. How about next Tuesday? Impossible. By next Tuesday, we'll have our burrow in Grubstake and be far away prospecting. My partner and I have a fortune to make, and time is running out. We'll be returning this way by the middle of August, at the very latest. You can plan the match for the 15th, sir. The three gentlemen from Hangtown nodded and departed. Jack gazed at Praiseworthy as if a complete stranger had been hiding through the years under the elegant manners of a butler. He was enchanted. But Pitchpine Billy whipped off his hat and jumped on it. Bullwhip, he snorted. You've gone and lost your mind. Before the 15th day of next month shows up, you better make your last will and testament. Jack had just lowered himself into the coyote hole when a sudden excitement spread through the diggings, and he pulled himself out again. There was a shout of voices back and forth across the stream from claim to claim. Old Quartz Jackson is back, and he's brought his new missus with him. Men dropped their shovels and gold pans and abandoned their long toms. Miners crawled out of coyote holes. What's that? Him and the lady is putting up at the hotel. The excitement even touched Pitchpine Billy. Boys, he said to Praiseworthy and Jack, I ain't seen a lady in so long I near forgot what they look like. Praiseworthy rested his arms on the handle of his shovel and grinned. He gave Jack a nod. This is the day we've been waiting for, partner. Watch and see. Pitchpine Billy scowled. Well, don't just stand there. Look at you both. Dirt sticking out on you like you ain't had a bath in all year. Why, it's a disgrace. I'm ashamed of you. You heard what they said. There's a lady in town. Within 5 minutes, miners were everywhere along the streams, scrubbing and shouting and planning to go to town. Pitchpine Billy waded in with his clothes on and began dumping hatfuls of water over his head. Later, shirts and trousers could be seen on every bush, drying out in the mountain sun. Miners stood at mirrors tacked to trees and got out their straight razors. Half a dozen familiar beards disappeared. Others were trimmed and shortened. Praiseworthy took his time. When he and Jack emerged from their canvas tent, they were wearing bright green neckties. Pitchpine Billy stood fluffing out his beard. He stopped and he stared. Help yourself, said Praiseworthy. That is, if it's all right with my partner. It's fine with me, said Jack. Pitchpine Billy grinned. Don't mind if I do. The neckties were so bright that they could be seen across the river. Soon, the miners who had laughed at Jack the night of the auction were swarming about the bushel of neckties. So, what's going on right now? So, Quartz Jackson is coming into town. He's bringing his wife, and the miners are freaking out because they haven't seen a lady in months. So, they have been very dirty, and so they're trying to get themselves presentable, and they're washing in the river, and they're trying to shave, and now Praiseworthy and Jack have on these awesome neckties to make them look especially fancy. And now Pitchpine Billy has one on, and now all the other miners are coming over sort of interested. I'll give you a pinch of dust for one of them neckties, Jamocha Jack. I'll give you 2 pinches. Pitchpine Billy was laughing. Don't fight, boys. Just get in line here. Looks like Jamocha Jack has cornered the market on neckties. He caught you sleeping, didn't he? Just hold your pouches open and I'll pinch out the gold, since I got the biggest thumbs in the diggins. Praiseworthy stood idly by with a foot on a stump and lit a long 9 cigar. Within 20 minutes, the basket was empty. Every necktie was gone. Pitchpine Billy pulled the strings on Jack's buckskin pouch and handed it over. It was as heavy as a weight. Jack weighed it in his hand and tossed the pouch to Praiseworthy. That ought to get us a burro, he grinned. And maybe a gun, Praiseworthy said. Yes, sir. That auction had better learn B from a bull's foot to get the better of Jamocha Jack. Gents, let's go to town. The miners had formed a crowd outside the Empire Hotel, and when Corch Jackson brought his lady out onto the porch, the miners whipped off their hats. Oh my gosh, that's Molly. Molly! Oh, just ignore her. All right. The miners whipped off their hats as if it were the United States flag they were looking at. By the great horn spoon, Pitchpine Billy muttered, a genuine woman. She had sparkling eyes and a smile for everyone. Corch Jackson wore a vest with a watch chain across it. We ferried up some cut lumber, the missus and me, and we're going to build a cabin. And you boys are welcome to drop in for tea. Ain't that right, Hannah? Hannah, Pitchpine Billy murmured, ain't that the prettiest name you ever heard? Corch Jackson looked out over the crowd. He recognized Praiseworthy and Jack and gave them a nod. Step up, boys. I'll introduce you. Make it fast before you're strangling them neckties. And that's the end of the chapter. See you next time.